Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
This episode represents a bit of an edge for Brian and I. When we first started discussing the possibility of dedicating an entire episode to a man's understanding of the menstrual cycle, we recognized that a good portion of our male listeners would choose to skip this episode. And I suppose we can understand that because many men have been raised to believe, and by the way, Brian and I fall into this category too, that the menstrual cycle is really none of our business. It's her thing to deal with. And the most that men really ever talk about the menstrual cycle when it comes to this stuff is that it's an inconvenience or a barrier to us having the kind of sex we want when we want it, that it could be gross, or that PMS is a one-way ticket to crazytown. Now, for the men who want to continue to believe this narrative, chances are they've not even gotten this far. But by the very nature that you chose to press play and listen to this episode, you identify as one of the men who recognize that the menstrual cycle is core to the experience of being a woman. And you recognize that by deepening your understanding of it, that you can build intimacy with your partner. You recognize that you want to better understand the 4 seasons of the menstrual cycle so you can build that intimacy and understand the different feelings and experiences that your partner may be going through during those 4 seasons and what she may need from you specifically during each of those seasons. And then finally, you want to learn how to express what you need, what your needs are during the different seasons, so that ultimately you and your partner can become closer together. And instead of the menstrual cycle being this mystifying thing or this taboo thing, it can actually be a central tenet to you having a relationship that you love. Now, our guides for this discussion are the wonderful founders of the Red School, the redschool.net. Alexandra Pope and Sjanie Hugo Wurlitzer founded the Red School, and they've been working together, I think, for a combined 40 years of experience working with women, guiding them to a new approach of women's leadership, creativity, and spiritual life based on the uniquely feminine way of the menstrual cycle. They have a book that's been published by the Hay House, which is called Wild Power: Discover the Magic of Your Menstrual Cycle and Awaken the Feminine Path to Power. And the beautiful thing is that this is also an edge for Sjanie and Alexandra, because this is the first time that they've ever gone on a men's platform to educate men about how they can show up for their partner during the menstrual cycle. So fellas, I think we're really doing amazing work here, and I celebrate you for pressing play on this episode. And by the way, if your partner isn't listening to this episode with you, I invite you to pause, bring her into the conversation so that the two of you can listen and get very specific with what she needs during her cycle. Enjoy the episode. Sjanie, Alexandra, welcome to our show. This is such an honor to have the two of you on.
Thank you so very much. We're equally excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and this is setting a new personal record for Brian and I. This is 4 people on one single podcast, so we're going to roll the dice and see how this one goes.
Yeah, we're testing the limits of Zoom here, 2 on 2.
Yes.
Yeah. We were all speaking before the show started recording about how this conversation is really going to be an edge for all 4 of us, because Brian and I have not really ever dived into this deeper conversation around how a man can be an ideal partner with understanding his partner's menstrual cycle. And the two of you have done countless coaching with women, over 40 years of experience collectively, I believe, with your community. But this is the first podcast that you've recorded with a few men who run a men's community. I'm just curious, maybe the first question we would love to ask the two of you is, tell us a little bit about the Red School, which is the school that the two of you run. Why does it exist? And then why did you say yes to us to being on our show?
Great. Well, let me introduce Red School. So Alexandra and I have co-founded Red School together. We've been working together for about 10 years, but Alexandra really is the pioneer of this work. For her, it started over 35 years ago, and then we came together 10 years ago. And our work at Red School is really about wanting to restore menstrual cycle awareness to our culture, and for cycle awareness to become really known as a woman's spiritual practice and the path to well-being and creativity and fulfillment for women. And we really feel, we feel excited about it because it's a whole new evolving consciousness that comes when women practice cycle awareness. So we're looking to train women who are wanting to take this work out into the world, where we run a menstruality leadership program, and our focus is really on finding ways to restore cycle awareness back into our culture. So that's Red School. And Alexandra, do you want to take the second piece of the question?
Why we said yes. Yes. Oh, my God. Well, because you are our beloved other half on the planet. And we need you to be on the inside story of this. It's very interesting. For a long time, this work just had to be women only because there was so much taboo. I mean, there still is, but it's really shifting. In the last 5 years, it's really lifted. But for women, there's so much shame attached to menstruation, or self-rejection, or embarrassment, or, of course, many women suffer with it. But we've had to hide the fact of our menstruation, our menstrual cycle and menstruation, to succeed in the world. And it's quite an edge to cross, to not only start talking about it sort of privately amongst ourselves, but then to start speaking it to others and to say, actually, this organizes my life in a very powerful way and I want to be public with it. It's quite a line to cross that. So we've had to do our work just women only to make it safe for women. And we're so ready now. The conversation has gone on long enough, and we can't leave men out of it any longer. We need
Love
you.
that.
Yeah, to go to the next level, if you like, with this work.
This is certainly a topic that I don't know if I was looking through a bunch of podcasts and I saw menstruation, I would probably still have this feeling of, not for me. I don't really need to listen to that. And I ran a sexual health company for a couple of years, and whenever I went to the expos around sexual health, there was many tables that had to do with menstruation. There were apps, there were cups, there were organic tampons, there were everything related. And I had that same feeling that I just mentioned where, not for me, not for me, not for me. And it came with the assumption that women knew exactly what was going on with them, and I didn't have to worry about it. So I'm excited to dive into this to understand more of it and how it affects the connection and the partnership, even more than just the individual alone or me alone.
Yeah. And I know that many men, and Brian, myself included, were raised to believe that the menstrual cycle was something that was exclusively women's to own. And it was none of our business. It was also positioned to us as an inconvenience to men wanting what they want when it comes to sex. Yes. It also is portrayed in social conversations and in media as, she's in her PMS moment and she's about to go crazy. And so we just want to stay away from. That's how we were raised. And unfortunately, so many men as well. And so what Brian and I have really started to learn through like those expos and through talking to women who run communities who have, like you two, are starting to really bring it out of the taboo and bring it into normalizing this, but also the beauty of the connection that men can have with their partners if they understand some of this stuff. I think it would be really helpful if you could help us walk through the 4 seasons of the menstrual cycle, which I know is an article on your website that was really helpful for me. If you could walk us through those 4 seasons and what men's role could be as he watches his partner or helps hold space for his partner through those seasons.
So our menstrual cycle in textbooks terms is 28 days, but in reality for every woman that really varies, and it's not necessarily 28 days and it's not necessarily a fixed 28 days. But let's go with 28 days as a sort of basic template, and day 1 would be the first day of bleeding. So we liken the 4 phases of the cycle to the inner season. We liken them to the seasons of the year because we as women experience them like the inner seasons of our being. So menstruation, which is the first phase, which is from day 1, just before bleeding, through bleeding, so roughly sort of the first 6 days of the cycle that we call the inner winter. Then the phase that follows that, which is the pre-ovulatory time, that we liken to the spring, that we call the inner spring. So that's roughly day 6 or 7 to about day 11. And then from day 11 to about day 18, day 19, that's the ovulatory phase of the cycle. And we call that the inner summer. And then the second half of the cycle is around day 18, 19 to, again, just before bleeding, a day or two before bleeding. That's the premenstruum, the kind of notorious PMS territory, which is the inner winter. And let me tell you, that phase of the cycle has had such a bad rap. And really a big part of our work is really reframing it and shining a light of truth on that. So that's the inner autumn of the cycle. So Alexandra, do you want to describe the kind of shifting moods and energies now that I've laid out the structure?
Yes. So a woman's energy and mood shifts throughout the cycle. So at menstruation, so this is the sort of archetypal template I'm giving. And each woman's going to have her own version of this. I can't emphasize that enough, according to her own nature, her health, and so on. But the sort of archetypal template is that menstruation, we are naturally more drawn inward. And our energies are at their lowest at that point. And we are actually at our most tender, our most permeable. If you could see the sort of aura of our psyches, they would have a lot more holes. The aura would have a lot more holes in it. You know, it's just, we're way more sensitive to everything.
Thin-skinned.
Thin-skinned is the word. And now this looks like a weakness, but actually it's a very powerful thing because it allows us to enter into a very expanded consciousness. So it's actually spiritually a very expanded state, a naturally expanded state of consciousness because of that vulnerability. We can say more about that in a moment. So we're in this very sort of internal place where we're very present to ourselves. So we like to say the inner lights are blazing and the outer lights of the world are all dim. So we're less conscious of what's happening around us, but we're deeply present in ourselves, to ourselves.
Alexandra, to that point, and so we're talking about the first 6 days, or there's the inner winter? Okay.
Yeah.
When the outside world starts to quiet down, or maybe just not as aware, how might that show up when she's much more inward? If she's aware of this part of her cycle and she appreciates what's happening, how does that show up versus maybe a woman who does not know what you're teaching right now and she's just kind of going through it? How does that show up?
Oh, well, right. That's a good one.
It's a really good question.
Shall I say a little on this one? So I'd say a woman who isn't aware of her cycle and doesn't really know how to follow her own energies at menstruation might be feeling kind of a bit battered and stressed and strained and agitated and annoyed and possibly even angry because they're kind of having to fight against themselves and battle with the demands of the world. Whereas if you really know about this and you trust it and you go with it, you'd probably be more likely to be experiencing a kind of release or a let go, some sort of de-stressing in your system. And a deep soothing, and you almost certainly would be tapping into states of bliss and love and deep kind of belonging and meaning. There's the potential for profound kind of connection at this place in the cycle. So that gives you the kind of the
range. That's a big range.
Big range.
I was going to say the sliding doors could go this way, could go that way.
Awesome.
Yeah, so there we are, energy at its lowest. We're at our most interior place, like deep in the inner cave of the inner cave of the inner cave, you know, the inner sanctum. And then as we come out of menstruation, there is this expansion. There's like an expanding current from menstruation all the way up to ovulation. So it's like you're riding a wave, actually, you know, on the ocean. There's a wave growing. And as you're coming out of menstruation, you kind of catch that wave.
It is.
And it's a wave of possibility and it's like new life. It's like, oh boy, I've come back to life again. And it's like how we feel in spring. You know, every year when spring springs, and it's pretty wild in England, it's just so abundant and outrageous the way spring comes back. you just have that same energy in yourself as you come in.
And I should also say, part of this phase is there's this sort of rise of sexual energy that happens. And I know, when I hit day 7 of my cycle, I used to write down a word or a phrase to capture the energy of each day. I did something called chart art on Instagram for a while, which was really fun, just producing a piece of art and a couple of words for where I am in my cycle. By the way, men should go check that out because you could really get some good insight from that. But one of my classic words around day 7, day 8 would be turned on. I would just suddenly feel this kind of rising drive, desire. It was both sexual, but also I just suddenly felt turned on by life, like excited, interested. My appetite came back. It's such an interesting, can feel really good. It's a very good phase for women and feel sort of filled with feelings of excitement often as well.
Yeah, you're kind of freshly minted again, It's so cool. We get to be remade every month. But the spring also has a certain vulnerability about it. There's a kind of innocence and kind of youthfulness. It's not so worldly yet. And I think that innocence needs to be cherished. There's pleasure and delight in there. So we're sort of coming out towards the world, but we've still got a certain kind of aligned, privacy with ourselves. It's actually a very good time for setting the line with your work and things, because you've got this connection and a focus and natural focus, natural motivation. It's fabulous.
I think what would be really helpful is during the inner phase, right? Like, so we're talking the winter, the first 6 days is a man's partner is going inward. What could his role be there in terms of like, what does she need? What would she want from him? How could he find that out? What guidance would you give him during that phase?
To just start by saying, I think every woman's needs are going to be slightly different, but let's just give you some kind of archetypal things and things we've heard a lot of women say, and I'll also speak from my experience.
Great.
At menstruation, what a woman needs more than anything is to be able to let go. And that means to sort of jump ship, to abandon responsibility, and to just walk away from everything, and to have that time of privacy and surrender and time to really go inward. And the truth is, in our normal everyday lives, we are all kind of holding responsibilities, whether it's jobs, families, domestic life, whatever the case might be. And the beautiful thing about being in relationship with a man is that responsibility can then shift. Like, they can take the lead, they can hold the fort, they can basically be the caretakers and the space holders so that the woman can step back, they can step forward. On a very deep level, I know what I need is to feel safe and protected. And in part, that means like take care of all the bullshit, take care of
what is
all
that for you? Like, what specifically is that for you?
Well, take care of my children is number one, because I've got 2 kids. But also protect my space. Like, if somebody's wanting something of me or needing me, tell them I'm not available. Like, be the guardian, be the gatekeeper for me. And really hold the preciousness of menstruation kind of in the forefront of your mind, and realize how much it matters for the women and for our relationship, for the relationship. It really matters. So fight for me to have the space. That's what I want. I want you to fight for me to be able to take the space.
Love that.
Yeah. Because I'm usually fighting with myself to take it as well. I mean, that's the truth. I've got deadline things. So I want you to say to me, Sjanie, just leave it. I'll take care of things. I'll do the dishes. I'll do the blah, blah. I'll go fetch the car. I'll do, whatever needs to be done.
Love that. Fight for me to have the space. As guys, I mean, we would love to do that. Okay.
So this is an opportunity for guys to say, I can do. Here's a time to do.
Exactly. And men can so do. So let me follow on, because I know you're coming to the spring. So I'll come back to that turned on thing. What's so interesting is, and this is happening on all levels, but I'll speak to it on the kind of sexual energy level. The more that I can let go and the more I can have the privacy and space that I need to really unravel and decompress, the more chance there is of that regeneration coming for me, the more chance there is of that natural surge and desire coming back. If I can't drop my bundle and if I don't rest, I don't have that turned on, lit up enthusiasm. It doesn't come back in the same way.
Love that.
So,
now we're talking about some serious incentives here.
I thought I would throw an incentive in there.
Yes. I don't know if you saw my eyes, but they got very big. I've never looked at dishes the same since today.
Yeah.
One more teaser before we get to the turned on is in the winter phase, in this inner phase. I've read that this is the time of the deepest intuition. And my understanding is that in some cultures, they have what's called bleeding lodges, where the women of the community would come together during this phase of their menstrual cycle. And together they would almost like to tap into their intuition collectively to understand what the community needs were for the future. And the community would then take those downloads and actually build the future of their community based on that. Do I have this somewhat correctly? I'm sure I'm fumbling around somehow, but what is this deeper intuition that comes during these first 6 or 7 days?
You are right, Dominic. That is so, or was so. Certainly within Native American communities, that was so.
Yeah.
And we believe it profoundly to be so, that we, at menstruation, we have this natural capacity for visioning, for tapping into the bigger story, for getting the download about our own lives, what our own callings come through. But absolutely, we can dream for the community or vision for the community. Of course, I'm post-menopause now, and Sjani's happily menstruating away. And pretty much after every bleed, she comes back to work and says, "Oh man, it just came to me. It was so clear. We've got to do this and that." And so I get really excited when Sjanie goes off to bleed, because I know something is going to come through very powerfully for her. So it is both, within families. I think, we vision for ourselves, but we can vision for something for our family, our relationship, and for our larger community. So at menstruation, it's like with this space and the greater vulnerability we have at menstruation, this greater permeability, and then having the space, these are the conditions that allow a woman, the emotional safety that Sjanie spoke of, allow a woman to just drop into an extraordinary place of presence with a larger consciousness, with the soul of the world, if you like. And it just comes through. It is very powerful. It's amazing.
Alexandra, you and I were talking earlier about the menstrual cycle as a vessel for the relationship, and you said something very beautiful about what menstruation might mean for a relationship. I think this would be the perfect time to say that.
Oh, wow, yes. This is big stuff that I'm going to say now.
We're all ears.
Now, this is predicated on a woman really being in touch with her cycle and really taking time for herself at menstruation and being really supported in that, feeling safe to be able to assert her needs, for her needs to be okay and to be able to follow them. There's a place, actually it's just before bleeding, but the most vulnerable and powerful place in the cycle are in the hours just before bleeding. That's where we're most open. We can drop into the most extraordinary experience of love and union, a sense of deep union with ourselves, but also our partners, if they know how to be with us and be with this vulnerability that we're experiencing. They can also taste this experience of union with us. So we take a man into that with us. Now, this is high spiritual practice. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. You can't make it happen. You have to just be very present to each other. And as the woman steps into this expanded consciousness and feels this union and love, her partner, her beloved, may also feel himself in this expanded reality and experience something very exquisite. So that is just one part. And I think perhaps just a sort of corollary to that is that just whether you experience that or not, just for a woman to be able to deeply drop when she bleeds and to feel the love that comes, it's extraordinary, this wash of love and this deep intimacy with herself, for that is what it is. I feel she comes back with some kind of elixir for the relationship. It's sort of ineffable. I can't really say what it is, but I feel a couple will know what this elixir is over time. They will feel how their relationship is infused by something, by the magic of honoring the menstrual cycle month after month.
And when you say elixir, I know you said it was like kind of hard to put it into words, but what might that feel like? What might that look like in terms of behavior between the two of them?
Oh, that's a good question. Wow, you're great. For me, it would be this intimacy, this word. It's not sexual, this word, when I use the word intimacy. There is a place they've touched together that they can't abandon now, a deep kind of closeness. So even as life has all its roughs and tumbles and shit happens and we have bad days and we're grumpy and reactive and so on, there is a place that you've touched with each other that you can't abandon. It's kind of a holiness. You've touched the holiness of relationship.
It feels, Alexandra, like it's something that, as we're struggling to put it into words, but something that we can feel and always go back to and always have as something that connects us.
Yes.
That's a very beautiful, safe, powerful feeling.
Yeah,
Wow, that's lovely. That's lovely what you said.
That is very beautiful, because Alexandra used this phrase, the menstrual cycle can be a vessel for our relationship. And one of the things that I experience is, one of the things that being connected to my cycle does for me is that it connects me to myself, and it creates connection in our relationship. And menstruation in particular has this way of kind of creating a coherence in our relationship. It really brings us together, and our relationship becomes like a creative enterprise. I mean this in the nicest possible way, but that we have this, we're sort of on track together, that we have this kind of shared vision, and we're in the river of something together. And even as we might be doing different things in our life, there's this kind of coherence or something that is holding us, and we feel that we're in a process together. It's such a relief, actually, because our relationships go through cycles, and you go through kind of times when you are really close and connected, and times when you're sort of off doing your own thing, and times when you're sort of in working through stuff. When you understand the cycle, and when a man and a woman are both connected to the cycle, all of that has a place, and all of that needs time, actually, and all of those phases become necessary, and it becomes less of a disruption to the relationship and becomes more creative, actually. And you can kind of ride those rhythms together, and that takes a lot of stress out of the relationship. Really, it starts to feel like, oh yeah.
I'm already feeling that. I mean, I'm not in relationship right now, but I'm like already feeling with what you've given us through the first phase, the first season with the inner winter. I feel so equipped, right, to fight for that space for my future partner.
Beautiful.
And then to understand what space means for her, right? Because Sjanie, you said this before, it means something different for every woman. For you, it's taking care of the kids. And if someone wants your time, to say, no, not right now. So like to find out what that means for my partner, so that when she's ready, like when she comes back on day 7, now she's in the inner spring and she's fully rejuvenated. Now we're at this place of she's turned on. And what might that look and feel like? And then what can we as partners do to either be there, be supportive, to enjoy and partake in some of that inner turn on?
Yeah. So I'll say what it might look like. Alexandra, you can do the second part. So what it might look like, for me, I'm day 7 today. So that's the place I'm in. I feel, so how it looks for me and in my relationship is I am much more playful, much more up for messing about, and I'm much lighter, and my capacity is really grown. So I can kind of take charge of stuff. I can handle things, and I'm not feeling very conflict driven. I'm feeling quite harmonious and generous, actually, is how I feel at the moment. So Alexandra, maybe you want to feed a little bit into that with how men can connect with women in this place.
Well, interestingly, the thought that came to mind for me is that here men have been having to hold the space for women. And of course, men have needs too. You have emotional needs, you have time-space needs.
Yes.
And I have this feeling that, we're coming out of menstruation and you're probably thinking, thank God she's come back. God, I couldn't hold the fort any longer, Here, you carry the baby. Here's the baby. I'm out of here.
Alexandra, you've been here.
You're making a lot of fans right now, Alexandra.
I know. I've got to tell you something really funny. Alexandra comes around to my house and I'm going to be bleeding. And Alexandra goes, oh, no, not again. And her and my husband both kind of collude on the fact that, gosh, it just feels like she's always bleeding, doesn't it? They've got this bond. He even said to me once, Alexandra, she really knows what it feels like for a man, doesn't she? It's the advantage of post-menopause.
Yes, we have a little sympathy for you now.
It takes some time, yeah.
I think the thing is that, a woman has energy now and she's got chutzpah in the system to go out and do stuff. So she's kind of there and can do stuff with you. One of the things that I really think that's very important, actually overall for men meeting women and the menstrual cycle, is that know your own limits. Take care of yourself. Don't abandon yourself.
Okay.
Because if you abandon yourself, you're going to have backlash.
Have you seen that go wrong, like where a man has abandoned himself and what ends up happening in that situation?
Well, I've seen it in therapy, actually. Men have come to me for therapy because they often abandon themselves in the premenstrual time and get quite battered by partners, because we haven't even got to the autumn of the cycle yet, with that critical energy coming in. And they don't know how to meet it. And when they don't know how to meet it, when they don't take care of themselves and abandon themselves, actually, it's like fuel to the fire. It makes a woman even angrier, interestingly. It doesn't work if a man isn't in his own sort of integrity.
That's a really important point, Alexandra, because it's so easy for us guys to give. And then when Dominic and I talk to these guys, they feel exhausted. They feel like they don't have that capacity anymore. And understanding from what you're saying here is like that doesn't do anyone any good, no matter what
it doesn't.
cycle we're in.
I'm thinking back to one of our most popular podcasts was with a woman named Madeline Moon, and she did something called 5 Ways That Men Lose Credibility with Women. And one of the top ways that she said men lose credibility with women is not having integrity in what you can and cannot handle. Right? Because like we want to believe that we are so capable of holding everything, but if it's done from a place of resentment, from a place of white knuckling, then ultimately she doesn't feel safe. She can recognize the energy behind how you're showing up for her. And Alexander, like you just said, most likely will then turn on him, as it will make it even worse because she can't trust him.
That's very powerful.
This is one of the blessings of the cycle, is because it is cyclical, there is this changing dynamic, and there is actually a time for the shift. So, my husband and I have a sort of unspoken rule whereby, in the sort of spring, summer of the cycle, I'm the one putting my best foot forward, taking the extra weight, doing a bit more, giving him more space, because he's a creative, so he really loves having his empty space. So I'm holding it for him then because I can. And then when the cycle swings round, it's sort of his turn, and that way we're in this sustainable dynamic that allows us both to have our needs met and allows us to neither of us burn out, really, which is the key.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this spring phase, she's typically rejuvenated, turned on. This might be the time for adventure. This might be the time for what else?
Experimentation, play, having fun, socializing.
This sort of gathers pace, because by the time you get to the summer of the cycle is really, you're out there. It's like party time. It's high noon. It's high summer inside her, We women can be all things to all people at this time for about 10 days. You can get away with it.
We call the summer of the cycle superwoman territory. Because
what days is that?
That's ovulation, day 11 to 19, superwoman. You can throw anything at us.
Yeah, we are, harmony. We're not going to pick fights at this time. Nothing is too much trouble at this time, parenting, relationship stuff. And we can really be there for you, if you want to sort of, as Sjanie was saying, she lets her husband go off and have his space. That's the time to ask for stuff for yourself, actually, not just when she's about to bleed. You'll get killed at that point, probably.
I love the honesty. So refreshing. Okay.
It's true.
But you come, spring, summer, you've got needs. You need to go off and disappear for a while or whatever, stuff you want to do together, because, you want to go out and do stuff together. That's the time to kind of book all that and do all that sort of stuff.
And it's probably a good idea to have, if there are sort of difficult conversations or things that you need to ask, you're more likely to get a harmonious and good response in the spring and summer
Oh,
of the
yes.
cycle.
Good to be tactical like that.
Yeah, if you want to be tactical, bring it to a woman in the spring, summer of her cycle. You've got a big question to ask her. You're thinking about, changing jobs, moving house, whatever.
Ooh,
Bring it to her in the summer. She's much more likely to be sort of, yes, we can do that. We can do anything.
Okay, so that's to that point. So, by the way, fellas, I really hope you're listening to this. You bring it to her in the summer. She's like, let's move. Let's take the next job. We'll uproot everything. What might happen when fall rolls around?
Right.
You've got it.
Sjanie, I think you should describe your experience of crossing from the summer to the autumn.
Yeah.
Now, you see, here Sjanie and I working together in the business. And when Shanie's in the summer of her cycle, she is incredible at getting stuff done. I just marvel at the things she's ticking off on the list. She's incredible. And I could throw stuff at her and she's doing it and she's doing it. And then there comes a moment.
Tell us about that moment.
Yeah,
she doesn't take it out of me, but I can actually feel it down the airwaves because we don't actually live in the same town.
And now we're at day 18 or 19 now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
exactly.
This is the precipice.
The crossover from summer to autumn is often very notable for women. So for me, I feel like, we spoke about that sort of superwoman, I can do everything. I suddenly have this sense of like the carpet has just been pulled out from under me, and suddenly I'm like, where did the ground go? So, I suddenly just don't have that same sort of resilience and capacity that I did. And it's almost like the atmosphere inside myself changes. So the best way I can describe it is if I'm like inside a movie and the soundtrack in the summer is all kind of easy and light, and suddenly the soundtrack for my inner movie goes a little bit like dark, and there's this sort of atmosphere change in my system, and I usually wake up just feeling a little bit irritable. I wake up and my skin's crawling and there's just this kind of irritability in my system. The feeling I often have is just of needing a bit more space, and my energy levels have dropped and I'm starting to feel a bit more tired, and like I'm just a little less interested in that kind of distance comes in for me. And often men will notice that women kind of get a bit irritable, a bit sharp. They suddenly start to kind of turn on them and get a bit more critical and difficult. And you sort of be out of the know, what did I do? Out of nowhere, because suddenly everything was fine, and next minute she's having a go at you. That's usually because she's crossed over into the autumn, that she's crossed the line.
So good indicator. Where did this come from? Maybe in fall, maybe in autumn. This is helpful.
It's really helpful to know.
And really, this is a signal to a woman to kind of adjust things, because it's amazing. The menstrual cycle is incredible. It's a system of sustainability, because you can't continue living at that summer energy. You would just burn out. And what the menstrual cycle does is it just goes tug. You're going to burn out if you don't just rein it in. But it's not happening in our brain, that thought. It's a sort of this thing that's coming up from our body. And so we notice it just by suddenly feeling irritable and reactive. And it's very important for a woman at that moment to go, oh, whoa, right, yes, I've just transitioned into my inner autumn. It's check in with me. How am I doing? Yeah, yes, just don't have the energy that I had, and I could burn out if I'd kept going. And also this need for spaciousness, because in the summer of our cycle, our needs are at the bottom. We're least connected to our own needs and feelings in the summer, which is why we have huge capacity to do stuff for others. But now the second half of the cycle is the return of all my feelings and needs, the things that I might have pushed aside, overridden. They're all coming back now to be reclaimed.
We sometimes say it's like the veil between the conscious and unconscious suddenly gets thinner, and it's like all the stuff that's been suppressed and below the surface suddenly comes up, and you start to feel a lot more deeply. And so, for example, I'd said yes to you about that big job move, house move, or whatever in the summer, and I'd totally suppressed the fact that I would have to give up my life, my friends, whatever. Suddenly that's going to start coming back up, and I'll be like, but hey, wait a minute, but what about the life I've... So that's what happens. Stuff starts coming back.
Fascinating. Okay.
I just want to say that, we now need more time and space to be able to process this stuff. So we can't do the same amount of stuff we did before. And it's just very important that a woman clocks this, because if she doesn't clock it, she acts it out in reactivity on others.
How does a guy help clock that? How does a guy help a woman recognize? Because I could see that being a very double-edged sword.
Oh my God, yes, Brad.
Right.
Oh.
What can we do in that moment?
Do you know something? You can slow right down. And I would actually just give her space and listen to her for a little while. Just listen. Just give her space. So it's almost like in you slowing down, her sort of mirror neurons and her being may pick it up, and she may start to slow down a bit. So you don't even have to say, oh, whoa, I think you've just crossed over into the inner autumn, or I think you're a bit premenstrual phase. Oh, we love to be told that. Let me.
I'm gonna make a sign that says "in autumn" and just hold it up.
Yes, yeah.
Just I think you're here right now.
Depending on the quality of your relationship and whether you have humor in your relationship, you could have these flashcards, that come up. But I really remember this. I wanted to be taken seriously.
Yeah, you absolutely do not want to be dismissed.
You don't want to be dismissed.
Of your cycle. You want to be listened to, definitely. Yeah,
but it's very important that you don't take shit either.
Talk about terms that I've had in the past, terms that I've listened to specifically during this time, during PMS, is like, holy shit, she's on the rag. She's way out there right now, which is the exact opposite of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
being taken seriously, being listened to and heard is the opposite that I think then the culture has created up to this point. So this is of all things here, this feels like one of the biggest areas where guys can really take a step back and pause and say, what can I listen to? How can I create?
Totally. Brian, you've just given me goosebumps, because I want to say I think one of the reasons women feel so much rage in the premenstruum is because we are dismissed, and we're sort of, you're just hormonal, you're crazy or whatever. Yeah. And the truth is, there is a very important truth that we are tapping into at this time. We might be delivering it badly. We might, it might not, we might not be very charming in how we're presenting it, but there is something very important that we are feeling and seeing and knowing that actually could be, probably both need to be facing, in the relationship.
What you said about sometimes it not coming across the best way, but there is some truth that needs to be told, really resonates with me. My girlfriend has given me feedback before. I think it might have been during the fall, during the autumn. And I was upset. I was hurt. I didn't believe her. I thought it was bullshit. And I asked myself, if there is a 1% truth, just 1%, that way my ego feels good, then what is the 1% truth? And I tell you, that was a life-changing piece of feedback that she gave me, even though it wasn't packaged in an easy, digestible way. So that truth that you're talking about, wow. That can be a life-changing time for us too, if we can listen.
I'd really love to come in here and I feel so strongly about this time and just being a guardian of it. Let me just see if I can find the words. So women are becoming now more and more open to themselves, more and more permeable. And there's a kind of instinctual intelligence arising. So, in the summer of our cycle, we're at our most rational. So that's one kind of intelligence. But in the second half of the cycle, we're coming into another kind of intelligence that's sort of intuitive. It's like a knowing. It's like a gut thing that comes through. We have sight at this time. We can see into things. We can see through bullshit. It's very strong. But if we are not managing our own nervous systems, if we are not in touch with ourselves and our own feelings, that power that's trying to come through just comes through as reactivity and anger and
destruction.
And destruction. And so we women, we've got a responsibility to wake up to this power and to learn to care for ourselves and to care for this. But it's crucial for men to meet us and respect this power that we have, for us to be able to stabilize in it more and more. And then we do come through with challenging truths. We speak truth to power at this time. There's a huge kind of discernment, and our critical energy is at its most finest at this time. But if we aren't present to ourselves, then it becomes this judgmental energy that's destructive. But if we are in alignment with that critical voice, we can deliver difficult truths, and they will hurt. But because they're clean, you can somehow receive them. So this is our kind of challenging gift to you as men. Like your girlfriend, that's a lovely story, a beautiful demonstration you did then, Brian, of meeting her and really honoring something. She knew something and you got it. How fabulous is that?
Exactly, because this energy is what allows what provokes things into evolution. And we women really channel this energy in the premenstruum, and we can evolve ourselves, we can evolve our relationships, we can evolve our culture if we are taken seriously and if what we are feeling and saying is given space. So it's very, very powerful.
Dominic and I have had countless conversations that are really beautiful at the level they're at, which is women and men wanting to come together and say, how do we do this better together? Like, it's time. It's now time. It's not just women doing it on their own. It's not just guys being angry. It's time to come together. And we struggle sometimes with understanding how to do that. What does come together exactly mean? What do we do? And this is just a mind-blowing example of how we can ride these waves together and gain insight. I mean, what do you say? Provoke evolution. Goodness, just by knowing that we happen to be here, and women can do the exact same thing by knowing their own cycle. This is a beautiful way to come together.
What a beautiful discussion around the 4 seasons of the menstrual cycle. And if we were going to summarize the 4, let's say in the next 60 seconds or so, could you give our men just that, again, the seasons, the day count, and like what they should be looking for and how they can support their partner in the best way possible?
All right. I might offer a sort of key word for each season, which is, in a way, the key word that it's what women are most needing, I think, archetypally at each time. So menstruation, which is, or the inner winter, a day or 2 before bleeding until about day 5 or 6. Rest, surrender, and we're most needing safety and protection.
Ooh.
Okay. The pre-ovulatory time, so that's around day 7 to 11, the inner spring. We're needing to kind of go tenderly and experiment and explore. And I think, Alexandra, what would you say we're most needing from men here is connection?
Connection, yeah.
Connection. And it's a time when we can reciprocate. And then the summer of the cycle, the ovulatory time, so roughly day 11 to 19. This is the time when we feel most generous, most longing to be seen. Often we feel our most sensual and beautiful. And here men can enjoy us. We love to be kind of seen and celebrated and appreciated. Yeah, and enjoy companionship. And again, we have a lot of capacity to support and be generous with men in this phase. And then the inner autumn, the premenstruum, so roughly day 18, 19 to a day or 2 before bleeding. So call that day 26. Here we're needing as women to slow down, to have space, and to sort of reconnect with our own needs. I think what we most need from men at this time is to be taken seriously, to be listened to, and to give us more spaciousness.
Love that.
Yeah.
Alexandra, is there anything you would add to that beautiful summary?
Yes, I think we said it earlier about the first half of the cycle for men. That's kind of the time where you can really have your needs and ask for things, and because you're a human, you've got needs, you've got things you want attending to, you want caring, and that's when we've got juice for that. And the second half of the cycle is, yes, much more we're needing to tend to ourselves, but this is where we have to be grown up. We both have to be grown up. It's dangerous to be needy around an autumn woman. You need to kind of know yourself and be in yourself, because we've got this quite challenging energy, because you're vulnerable. you have needs. You have your tender parts, and you need to be caring for your vulnerability. Well, coming into the autumn phase, because we can be reactive, because we want to have more space for ourselves. You may take that personally. You may think, oh, what have I done wrong? And in fact, you haven't done anything wrong. It's just that I just need to be with myself. By the way, you might have done something wrong because we're hypercritical at this time too. But also, sometimes it really isn't personal. And it's actually worth checking in and saying, have I missed something? Just tell me. I just need to know. And they go, oh, no, it's not you. It's just I had a terrible day at work and it's all gone pear-shaped.
Yeah. You two have come up with so many dynamite quotes. Like if I were on Twitter, they'd be tweetables. I mean, it's dangerous to be needy around an autumn woman. Love that. I wrote that down. And I'm just even thinking about that for a man's guide to the menstrual cycle, it's like what you've done to kind of demystify those stages, to give us a lens into what women are feeling during that time and what women could potentially need from their men during that time. And then even some of these things like, fight for me to have my space, right? During that's the inner winter phase. And it's dangerous to be needy around an autumn woman. Like those are really helpful things. And for our men, I think the one thing that I just want to reemphasize here is while we've been given guidelines, these are not prescriptions. They're not, right? They're not algorithms to run on your partner because she's an individual, unique human being who's changing by the moment, by the way, right?
Exactly.
Right. So what Sjanie and Alexandra have given us is this gift of reining in all of these questions that we've had to give us some structure to then approach our partner who may or may not be well-versed in many of the conversation points that we've had today, which I think is why this would be a beautiful conversation for partners to listen to together.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Because then it would stimulate a conversation. Because if you're listening together, the woman may say, well, actually, I don't experience it quite like Sjanie said. I experience it like this. It could become a talking point. Actually what I need is.
Yeah. Love that. Okay. We were just saying how we feel like we're just getting started with this conversation. And I feel the same exact way. I believe this is not going to be our last conversation, but for now, I think this would be a good jumping off point. And so for those who are inspired to do deeper work around this, and one of the things that didn't come up today, but I remember listening to one of your videos where you said that women who have really started to build their awareness around their menstrual cycle just feel happier, right? Like happier outwardly, happier inwardly.
Yeah.
And like, who doesn't want that? Right? Who doesn't? And it's, and this is something so naturally occurring. So if someone wants to find your book, what is it? Where can they find it? And then the redschool.net is obviously your website, but like if women want to do more work with you, where would you direct them? How would they find you?
All right. So our book is called Wild Power: Discover the Magic of Your Menstrual Cycle and Awaken the Feminine Path to Power. And actually, we would love men to read that too. I mean, it would be amazing for a man to have that level of understanding and insight on the cycle. So you can find that it's published by Hay House. You can find it online, all major bookstores, anywhere where books are sold. And if you come to redschool.net, we have a kind of very simple guide called the Menstrual Cycle Awareness ebook, which gives you the basics of how to practice cycle awareness. So this is for women, because all this knowing is activated through attention. We talk about cycle awareness as being the mindfulness practice for women, and we've really broken down the steps of that so women know really what that means in their everyday life and how to come into a living, creative relationship with their cycle. So that would be a great sort of simple place for women to start. And then we offer a whole number of courses, online, self-study, in person. You can find that all on our website, redschool.net. Yeah.
Awesome. And where are your in-person events? Are they workshops?
Currently, we run in-person events in the UK and in Europe, and we have had invitations to the States, so that is on our radar as well.
Beautiful.
We might make it.
Yeah, let us know if you do make it over here. And also, I would just be the first one to put my hand up for if you ever wanted to create something like a one-page PDF for men, like a man's guide to the menstrual cycle. Oh. We don't need an ebook. We just need a page or two. Yeah. Eventually, we're going to need the ebook, but just to start, we'll take the one-page PDF as kind of a summary of everything that you spoke. I think that would be a wonderful service to the men who are interested in this.
Oh, we'd love that. It's just so wonderful to have men who are interested in this conversation. And as Alexandra said, it's just, it's next level cycle awareness for men and women to be engaging in this.
It's just absolutely, I just feel so moved. I feel so happy, and just such a rich, satisfying conversation. Thank you so much, Dominique and Brian. Fantastic.
Yeah. And Alexandra and Sjanie, thank you for saying yes to us. Thank you for speaking to the men of our community, and also the women who listen. We have half our audience is women. It's amazing. So thank you. And then until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Hey, if you think this episode with Sjanie and Alexandra is one that more men need to hear, I will invite you to help to raise the profile and the awareness of it by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, pointing men to this particular episode. I expressed at the beginning of this episode that we believe too many men are going to skip over this, not thinking that the menstrual cycle is anything that they need to learn about. But the more voices, especially from our women listeners who say, guys, you need to hear this episode. It's got the gateway and the keys to you understanding your partner and building intimacy and trust with her, the more men will benefit from this. So we encourage you to please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review pointing men to this particular episode. Thank you so much in advance.